So I used to be a learning technologist, and now I'm an educational designer with a medical school. This work comes out of some research that I did together with Dr. Ellison Fox from Education, who's with us, as well as just work that I have done in LLI and ILI, where I used to work. And that work was mostly where I was using social media to disseminate research findings and try to create a community of practice there. And so in a sense, this is not so much I'm showing you something that we're doing it and it's working. This is more kind of bringing together some evidence, some things that have been tried, things that have been done at University of Leicester, some community of practice examples that I found from different practitioner groups. And in a sense, it's food for thought. It's, and I think it makes a strong case for social media being part of employability skills that we need to be addressing. So basically, I kind of already told you what we're going to do, but the three practitioner groups we'll be looking at are teachers, tech educationalists, and nurses. Some examples from actual teaching here at the university, and we'll finish up with just some thoughts about digital capabilities as employability skills. So just some statistics to start out with. So the percentage of UK adults who have which social media accounts. So you can see here 63% of UK adults have Facebook. This is as of last year. Twitter 20%, YouTube 15%, and WhatsApp 13%. I don't really classify WhatsApp as a social media. I don't know if you guys do. To me, it's just like texting. But this is Ofcom, and I guess they didn't know. As for teens in the United States, and that's current, so we've got Facebook at 71%, Instagram 52%, and I think the reason for that is because this has an age 13 starting point. This has no starting point. So you can have it when you're 11. Snapchat is 41%. I don't know if anyone here use Snapchat? Kind of, okay, yeah, we've got some Snapchat. I don't know it. So I take it as it's sort of WhatsApp with pictures? Kind of, okay, yes, somebody nodded, okay. And Twitter, 33% of teenagers, USA teens. Fortune 500 companies. So the gray is 2012, the greenish is 2013, and the beige is 2014. So Fortune 500 companies which have platforms. So most of them just go straight for LinkedIn. They also go for Facebook and Twitter, so those are the big three. Blogs, they're starting to reduce a little bit. YouTube, interestingly, they're starting to reduce a little bit, and Pinterest, I don't know if you know it, but it's very image directed. And just like to kind of recommend some new pages launched on our own university website. Vic Russell, who's starting back again tomorrow after her maternity leave, she is the social media person who works for our marketing department, and she's kind of starting to give this evidence for sharing out your research. And she's recommending blog, Twitter, and website. So I just think that's quite interesting that they're starting to give some guidelines on that. And percentage of UK charities. This one, they did it a little bit different, and this is 2013, but so 90% have either Facebook and or Twitter. That's how they did it. So that was a big one. But charities, you can see they're big on video and audio and images. And one reason for that I picked up was because, of course, they're looking for donations. And so they are communicating, and they want a quick and powerful communication to try to elicit donations. But they're also sharing research findings and communities, trying to establish a community. So to me, it's quite interesting, the ones that they're focusing on. Well, considering that we just looked, the last two slides had something to do with possible employers for our students, this is definitely food for thought. These are just some pictures of some of the, that report said these are some very good uses of those media. So YouTube, that one is Pinterest, this one is Vimeo. Thanks. Okay. I'm going to move quickly on. So Allison and I did some research on teachers. We did not go for social media savvy teachers. We went for any teachers. And this was some evidence that we got before our evidence. So teachers feel like pioneers in e-safety. So the pioneers is purple. So this one, they were very strong on e-safety, but not so strong. You see the purple is smaller for everything else. I know it's hard to read, but this says communication, collaboration, and participation. So in other words, using ICT and social media for other things other than teaching about e-safety, they're not so good, is what this was showing. And in our evidence, we actually surveyed and got more into the details with the teachers. And we had the teachers identify themselves, and so 56% identified themselves as social media enthusiasts, and you can see this was what they said about themselves. But looking at their actual behavior on social media, which is what we got into, it was a lot less. And so, interesting. So maybe they wanted to be more using it better, but they just kind of weren't. And behavior was more like 30% were like conscious Luddites. So that was quite interesting. And yet, then this is just some research that I discovered, a nurses community where they have a Twitter chat regularly called We Nurses, and they found that it helped them to discuss the process of revalidation. They found that helpful, and I would identify myself in this group, people who are digital stewards, so you know, people who help others with their digital technology. This group, the study was looking, is it actually a community of practice, the discussions on Twitter, any interactions on Facebook or whatever. And they found that some characteristics of a community of practice were satisfied, but they felt supported. It felt like a community that was learning from each other. Now, here's a couple of examples. So Dr. Can, this is some years ago, had a Google Plus use of, now how did he say, I remember you said, Google Plus is Facebook for science, is how you introduced it to your students at the time, I recall. And the students hadn't heard of Google Plus, but they tried it. They, of course, knew what Facebook was. And so they were sharing current events, and they had to discuss with each other articles that they were posting. And interesting now that Alan doesn't do this anymore, and perhaps we can find out from him why that is, but we can also know something on Google Plus hasn't quite taken off as Google had wished. Now here's some quotes. Here's a snippet from Dr. Paul Riley from Media and Communications, and he, in his teaching, uses this hashtag ACT and Protest. And basically, these are his students who are finding examples on Twitter, sharing with each other of examples of the media covering and their attitudes about protest. And I know he also makes use of YouTube and blogging with his students, and that is definitely ongoing now. So just to kind of wrap up, JISC is always coming up with frameworks for things like this. So I just went and found their most recent, and they're calling it digital capabilities. These things go in cycles of names. But I would say that of these, social media definitely applies to, I would say, these four: digital creation, innovation, and scholarship, digital identity and well-being, communication, collaboration, and participation, and learning and self-development. The scene that I was putting together in my head was that in addition to social media being a kind of necessary thing, a necessary vehicle for us to professionally show ourselves, you know, LinkedIn for CVs, academia.edu, I'm finding that quite helpful. But not only that, not only profiling ourselves out there, but a community that we could be learning from. And it's a kind of continuing professional development. And just to finish up with this most recent, it just came out a couple weeks ago, The Guardian saying one of their top tips in getting a job: start building a digital footprint of relevance to what you want to do. So in other words, you know, employers will look at the social media footprint much more than just don't have too many pictures of yourself looking drunk with a beer, but make it positive, show what you're about, what you're interested in. And perhaps you've already got a YouTube channel about your interests in biology or whatever it might be. They suggest LinkedIn, blog, website, Twitter, and I will stop there.
got a Twitter account. It's the only way I can keep up with what my son's doing. So, questions? So can we find out from Alan why you dropped Google
Yeah,
Plus?
we used Google Plus with students for 2 years, and the reason we dropped it is twofold. One is because Google Plus changed, and when Google launched Google Plus, it had a lot more promise than it has now. And I think Google is now rather embarrassed by Google Plus and would really like to walk away with it, as it is from pretty much every social tool that it's ever come up with. But that's not the main reason. The main reason was pedagogical. The main reason was because forcing students to use it, it put too much emphasis on the tool and not enough emphasis on task and process. And that's why when we ran our key skills module that I talked about, we made absolutely no technological recommendations to students about what tools we should use. We said, this is your team, this is your task, you organize it, you get on with it. And if they'd asked us questions, we would have answered the questions and supported them, but we didn't want to tell them what to do. So that was the main reason.
So Terese, a lot of my students have migrated away from the discussion board onto Facebook, but they won't allow me onto the wall. So how do we deal with that?
That's a zillion-dollar question. And I've discovered that what students are doing is they discuss with each other on Facebook, and then they hone their question, and then when it's good enough, then they will put it on Blackboard and present it so that it's presentable to the tutor. I'm not sure about this. In my experience with discussion boards, the best results we can get is if we actually set goals and have some structured tasks on the discussion board. To me, that's like the best use. But then there's also a place for just the kind of open discussion board, like any questions you have, and why they don't go there. I can only imagine that maybe it's because they're just a little bit embarrassed to ask questions which they might feel are dumb in front of their tutors. I know that law started where they just allow anonymous postings on the discussion board. And there's a lot of, not so much discussion, just questions. And then the tutor answers it, and then question, and the tutor, but they're all anonymous. But at least they're asking there, so that could be it.
Yeah, so I tell them that I'm not Superman, I'm Spider-Man. So I can't answer all the questions, but they can answer each other, and then I'll jump in when it goes wrong.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good.
Okay, another question? Got time for one more?
Do you think there's a small group of students that actually need support getting involved in social media?
I mean, I'm not even sure that I'm saying that we should use social media, but I think it's worthwhile to suggest to students that they show themselves professionally. And I think I'm going to say most students need guidance on that, because they just don't think of it as a place where you could have a professional persona. I think they just don't think of it that way. So yeah, this is why I kind of, these digital capabilities, there's something to that, where students kind of need some guidance as to wise use of this,
And some of us staff do too.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure staff are necessarily.
No.
Well, that's what we saw the teachers, isn't it? Yeah.
But that's the problem, isn't it? The whole discussion around social media is always in the negative, from primary schools all the way through media. It's all about the horror stories of what can go wrong, rather than the positive approach of what it can do for you, the positive outcomes. That's the issue.
So I always try to say, I've gotten paid work from over social media.
Yeah.
No, you have. I know you have. There's a lot of it.
Yeah, this is where the research is taking us next. Really, is that personal, professional, public, where people are with that, and to help explain this sort of mass of sort of sceptical, cautious users wanting to be out there for very good reasons. But they're trying to explore with them the balance between the positives, and it's not for everybody. So not to sell it, it's for everybody.
Okay, we're going